I guess I would say, what do you mean by prosecutorial discretion? I guess that's my question. And let me just tell you, I am the only candidate statewide, any office, that's literally handled hundreds, if not thousands, of criminal cases. I'm the only candidate that has tried cases in both federal and state court. I was a deputy county attorney for 6 years. I was an assistant attorney general for 5 years. I've also been a assistant United States attorney. So I've handled everything from gang cases to public integrity, public corruption cases. And one thing you learn as a prosecutor, like for example, as I've been out and about, people say, well, you prosecute this case or will you do that case? Look, no prosecutor worth their salt would ever say, I will absolutely prosecute that case or I won't prosecute that case. Now generally you can talk about where your priorities are and say, hey, we're going to make sure we're going after the gangs and the cartels, and we're going to make sure we're protecting people who can't protect themselves, and you can make sure that those are priorities and the resources are there in the office, instead of maybe trying to tell U.S. Airways how to run their airline. I mean, so you can make those types of priorities within the office. But at the end of the day, as a prosecutor, your job is to do justice. And once again, this is something you learn very first week on the job as a prosecutor. Your job is not to win at all costs. It's not to get a pound of flesh from somebody. It is to do justice. And I know this may even sound corny, but I know when I was a prosecutor, even before I went in to try cases, I mean, I would pray that justice would be done. I wouldn't pray that I would win. It's not my, and that's one thing, as a prosecutor, your job is not to win, it is to do justice. And so you don't bring cases unless you believe, you should not bring a case unless you believe there's a reasonable likelihood of conviction. So I will give you one example, like in a gang case. Let's say that there's a drive-by shooting. Very often you have uncooperating witnesses, there are neighborhoods with not the best credibility witnesses, and so you get in those situations where you may think you know who did this, but the question is, can you prove it to a jury of 12? And so, your job ultimately is to make sure that you don't bring charges unless you have a reasonable likelihood of conviction, and your job is to do justice. So those are your two of your guiding stars when you're doing these types of cases. But at the end of the day, as I was saying, as a prosecutor, what happens is that you get a case from a law enforcement agency. They bring you a case and they have to allege a violation of Arizona law. And we have an obligation, I believe, as prosecutors to review and look at every case that we get that's from a legitimate law enforcement agency involving an allegation of a violation of state law. Now, the county attorneys are really the kind of point of the spear when it comes to day in and day out prosecution. I mean, that really is the county attorneys. They're the primary prosecutors. The attorney general very often is a force multiplier, but there are instances where you have that jurisdiction, especially in some of these complex cases that spill over counties or dealing with cartels. And so I guess when you hire a county attorney, when you hire an attorney general, which is what you're doing when you vote and you support somebody, you're hiring them because you appreciate and you expect them to exercise judgment. And there's an old saying that no one does anything uncharacteristic of who they are. And I'm a huge believer that if you want to know what someone's going to do in the future or how they're going to, take charge of their office, you look at what they've done in the past. And I think if you look at my record as the director of a law enforcement agency at the Arizona Department of Gaming, that's a law enforcement agency. We had 35 sworn officers, but we actually, my last year, we came in under budget. We came in under our budget appropriation. We spent less money than we could or that we were allocated. But at the same time, we did less with more. I believe in being proactive. So we worked with the Native American communities to reduce the number of compact violations every year I was gaming director, because I told our folks, look, don't wait until someone breaks the law or violates the compact. If you think there's a problem with camera coverage or a slot machine, go tell them. Like, try to resolve the problem ahead of time, so then when we're doing our audits, we don't say, you're violating the compact. That's just bad for everybody. But we also worked with them, for example, and the gaming industry is highly regulated. It's a cash-intensive industry. Historically, it's attracted crooks, crimes, cheats, corruption. But Arizona voters in 2002 adopted gaming compacts, and so this is the structure we have. And I'm a big believer, once again, if you don't like the rules or the law, change the law or the rules, but this is what it is. And so as gaming director, one of the things that, it's so highly regulated, everyone has to fill out a gaming application at every tribal facility they're applying for, and they also have to fill out a gaming application with the state. But it essentially requests a lot of the same information about criminal history and all this other stuff, your finances. And so when I left, before I left, we'd actually worked on creating a universal application. So if you were a business, you didn't have to fill out 15 applications with every tribe and one with the state. You could fill out a universal application, try to cut down the paperwork. We reduced the size of the gaming application from 11 pages to 6, while still making sure that the communities were protected, and that if people wanted to lose their money in a casino, they could do so fair and safe. I was trying to make a joke there, because the house always wins if you go to a casino. You should know that. There's a reason why they have big hotels and golf courses. So anyway, so I'm very proud of the work we did, but at the same time, we aggressively pursued illegal gambling. For the first time in the agency's history, we seized illegal gambling devices. We shut down illegal card rooms. So, if you look at the track record I've had of gaming, you look at my track record as a prosecutor, I've always been forward-leaning, I've always been proactive, I've always had a reputation as a straight shooter. I got along with defense attorneys, I've gotten along with people regardless of their political affiliation, because I believe in Barry Goldwater's old adage that people can disagree, but they shouldn't be disagreeable. And so people have known where I stood on issues, they've known what I felt and I believed. And even with the tribes, we were in litigation with tribes over an issue, we had some contract negotiations, but we always did it in a respectful manner, and always keeping this, at least in my position, keeping the state's interest primary. And so at the end of the day, it's a long way to answer your question, and I'm new to politics. My answers are probably way too long. I apologize, but I used to work at the Goldwater Institute too, so that's a think tank, and so I think that you get used to talking about stuff, you just start rolling. So, but the prosecutorial discretion comes back to, once again, you recognize your role as a prosecutor. You recognize what the priorities of the head of that agency is, and at the end of the day, I think you look back to see how this person has conducted themselves when they've been given positions of responsibility, and whether that responsibility is being an assistant United States attorney, where you can have the power of the federal government indict somebody, or whether it's the way you ran a law enforcement agency. And so I think when you look at that, you can make a pretty good judgment of where that person is and what kind of discretion they will or won't have.